Welcome to today's session, Explicit Instruction, the Power of the We Do and Retrieval Practice, two very, very important pieces in education. What we're going to start today is with some outcomes, and then I'm going to review the materials you'll need before we start the session. But I'm going to go ahead and take my face off the screen, and so you'll just hear my audio through the rest of the session. So again, welcome. Our outcomes today are as follows. You will correctly use the appropriate number of we do's to support student learning. That's our first outcome. And the second one is that we're going to be using retrieval practice throughout the year to support long-term memory and learning. So, two outcomes during this session. The materials needed today are a training guide, participant handouts, and then you're going to be accessing some additional videos and the participant handout on a computer device. You might want to grab a paper and a pencil if you are going to be capturing your notes, whether it's going to be using the participant handouts or whether you're going to be just capturing it in a notebook. The training guide is very simplistic, steps 1 through 3. You're going to open this participant handout and then keep track of 3 passcodes given during this instructional video. We want to make sure that at the end you have the correct number of passcodes to access that certificate. So look for them throughout the main instructional video. We're in step 1 right now where you have access to this main video, but you also need to take time to open up the participant handout. Then we're going to move to step 2 where you're going to be involved in kind of a two-parter where you're going to access the 2 videos outside of this main instructional video. And then you're going to come back for step 2, part B, and we'll continue on with the retrieval practice instruction. And then we're going to finish by giving you access to the certificate. The participant handout versus blank paper. The reason why I recommend that you use the participant handout, print it out, is that it has some hyperlinks in it and you're going to be asked to observe. And so there's an observation checklist. So you want to use that and capture your evidence. And then, like I said, there are those instructional links that you should be able to go directly to the videos by clicking on the hyperlinks. So there are some benefits. Our first video clip, we're actually moving into step 2, is being able to click on the link and capture your information on the handout from the Expert Minute with Dr. Archer. And the reason why this is an important piece is that it gives you an overview of explicit instruction so that the language of explicit instruction, when you hear it within the educational setting, is very familiar to you. It's really a 6-minute at max video. So you're going to go ahead and watch that. And then after you watch that, you want to make sure that you pull the passcode out and write it down. Engagement. So that's your first passcode. And that'll give you a hint about the central theme for explicit instruction. Then you'll come back and you'll watch part A in this video. So pause, watch that video clip, and then come back here for part A. Okay, as you just saw, it's a tapestry of elements that are interwoven, what we call explicit instruction. Explicit instruction has a focus on content, it has design, it's got delivery components, and then at the end it has practice components. And so we're not going to be doing it in depth. This is a multiple day training, but we really do want to make sure that as you work with students, you fully understand the one of the delivery components. And so we're really going to be focusing on that, the delivery instruction of a skill. If we're helping students master a skill, what can we be doing? It's all about the we, and that's in the title as well, the power of that we, the we do. So if students are struggling just in the gen ed setting, what we consider tier one, you are going to be seeing skill instruction being delivered with modeling an I do, and then followed by a we do, and then followed by a you do. But if students are struggling and they're maybe receiving some tier two instruction, you might see the I do done just, repeat it, but the number of we do's increases significantly. You should be able to see evidence if they need additional we's before they show mastery and move on to you do. And that's where they're going to be doing it independently. And again, if you look at the tier three, you're going to see the I do increase and actually come back and circle through before we ever get to a you do. Again, it is all about the we. As I said before, and I don't know if you've captured it, this is really the instructional approach when you're talking about skills or strategies. When you teach them how to do something, it's not vocabulary, it's not fact, it is about the skills. Now, all of those other things are important. They need to know some facts, sometimes, especially when we're talking about math facts, or if we're talking about vocabulary, so that those barriers aren't there. But we utilize this when we're dealing with skills. You will be participating in an observation of a video, and it's actually, you'll walk away with a little bit of culinary skills at the end, because you will watch someone try to teach the skill of cutting an onion like a chef might cut an onion. You're going to be observing, did the teacher show the students how to perform the skill or strategy in a step-by-step and even exaggerated step-by-steps? That's an important piece of the I do. So it's the step-by-step. And if it's very complex, then you might actually have to take one part of the step and then do the entire I do, we do, you do, so that they get that first initial step master before they move on to the second step that might have multiple aspects of skill or strategy. Then after you proceeded to show them step by step and exaggerating the steps, you're going to tell the students how to perform the skill. You're going to be talking aloud. Tell the students what you're doing or what you're thinking all the way through. And here's something that sometimes, and often actually, gets missed, is that you're going to be trying to gain some responses from the students. So it's not just you talk as an educator and helping them through, but you're going to be asking them questions and asking them what are they noticing and what are they wondering, or what the teacher just told them that may be part of that step, so that they can kind of be involved in interacting with you during that I do. You need to make sure that you present the model in a clear, consistent, concise language, so that there's not a language barrier, vocabulary barrier. Then we get into the we do. And you're going to then observe the cutting of the onion with we do. Did the teacher guide the student in performing the strategy with them? So you're guiding, you're not doing it for them, they're doing it too. You're using that clear, consistent language again. You're going to be prompting them, but eventually you're just going to be asking them. So it's about fading the telling and doing more of the asking. Again, it's the guide, and you're observing and showing. This is the most important part that often gets skipped because of time. Teachers do I do, or educators do I do, and then they jump to, well, I've shown it to you multiple times, now you do it. But that we do is where the learning takes place, where they productively struggle. Failure is an opportunity to begin again more successfully. We need to be embracing that, because that's where they're asking questions and learning. And once we see multiple attempts at this, and the attempts being more successful each time, we'll eventually be reaching mastery. And then, and only then, do we go back to the you do. Now keep in mind that there might be in a you do, there might be some failure opportunities. And all that means is that we go back and step back one until we do. We don't pick up the pencil and do an I do. We actually allow them to do it, and we give them, we praise, encourage, and correct. It's called the PEC strategy. And so we're providing that encouragement during that time of the you do. And again, if we need to step back to we do, then we can do so. Now, there is on page 2, actually page 1 it starts and then it goes into page 2 of your handout, the checklist. It's a little more detailed, and so you'll see something like, remember, this is just my reminder again, skills. This is about a skill, not vocabulary, not facts. But you'll see something in your handout that looks exactly like this, where you have the bottom of the power of the we teaching the skill, and then you have the link. Now, I am going to just say this. For whatever reason, no matter how many times that I've tried different ways to listen to this, you will need to turn your volume up when you listen to this video. It is a wonderful example of teaching a skill that we all can access. And in fact, it has changed the way I cut an onion. When I first watched this, I was in that mindset, oh, this is pretty simple. I should be able to do an I do, and me do, and a you do. And I skipped the we do, just like that happens commonly. I watched them do the I do. And then I went home and I tried to cut the onion. I didn't turn on the video, and here's what happened. I messed up. I messed up multiple times. I went back and I watched the I do, just as if a teacher would do another I do, and I waited. And then I went home the next day and I attempted it again. And failure, opportunity for me to rethink and learn, really learn the power of the we do. So then I went and I brought my computer home the next day and I watched the I do. I did the we do. I paused the video, made sure I had my hands in the proper locations, that, that the onion was positioned the right way. Had to, reposition sometimes because I thought that I had it down. And it was only after the we do was done where I paused and looked back that success was had. So it is so important for us to stop and really think. And if you want to attempt the same thing, you watch it, then you try it without doing a we do. You may be right in the same boat, needing to gather a second onion. So have a couple on hand just in case. But otherwise, I would highly recommend that if you are wanting to do a little interactive video learning on cutting the onion, grab the knife, and be in a safe location where you can engage in this. Now, ultimately, I also want you to be analyzing, did the educator do this? Did the educator follow the steps in each, the I do, the we do, the you do? But focus on the we and the importance of that. Okay, so passcode number 2, write this down, is the we do. We do. There's going to be a multiple choice prompts in the certificate form. So you want to make sure that you capture that the we do is the one you want to choose. Okay. Whether you access the video on the training page or you access the video in the participant handouts, you should see this video that pops up, and you're going to see the countertop, the onions, and again, remember to adjust the volume up to high or put some headphones in so that you don't have any background noise disturbing what they're saying each time. And then enjoy. After the video, then you're going to then be coming back to this main video, and you will begin with part B. Pause this one, jump onto the link with the onion. Welcome back. I hope you have had success in understanding the components of the I do, the we do, the you do, all about teaching a skill or strategy. And so That power of the we is so important. It's done in a wonderful way, and I hope you share it with others. Now, we're going to be going into part B, which is all about the retrieval practice. Remember, part B is this main instructional video. You'll be on page 3 of the handout. So, you can follow through there and add your ideas and your notes. Let's begin. As Dr. Archer said in that very first video, and we talked about it just a little bit in part A, there are 16 elements. We are going to be focusing on that very last element, the practice. It's the 16th element. So we're going to be thinking about practice in the 3 different kinds. We know that we need to be deliberate in choosing what students do or what students are engaged in when they're practicing. So it should be something that is very key to their learning. We are deliberate in choosing what content is to be practiced. Spaced practice or distributed practice is where we space it over time. And in your handout, you will see figure 1 on that page 3 of the handout. There is going to be a picture of what encompasses spaced or distributed practice. And then there's retrieval practice, and that's what we're going to end with. But for now, we're going to put that on hold, just so that we can talk a little bit about that space and distributed practice, because it's important that we intentionally choose what's going to be practiced. But the research shows that if we just start with initial practice and we give them opportunities, and then all of a sudden we never revisit that initial and mass practice eventually fades. Okay? It's only stored in short-term memory. But if we know this, to have these little short practice sessions, they don't need to be long. They can be, in fact, spread out a week apart, a month apart, and then you're going to just do a little 10-minute review where you're going to be asking them to retrieve. And that's the important piece when we get into the retrieval practice, that it's not about you talking and reviewing. It's about you asking them to do that particular skill or to access that information. Not telling, but asking. Scheduling it out over time. Now, another way to do this is, when we're thinking about distributed practice is, again, you're identifying the skills that need. So you're being very intentional on whatever you're going to be asking them to practice. And you're going to determine the length of time. We talk about equal intervals or expanding intervals. The last example was the equal intervals. But here's an example of expanding intervals. You might do 18 days, 18 days, 18 days, 18 days of practice before you get into that final assessment. You also might do 10 days, then expand it a little bit, 20 days, and then expand it a little bit more, 30 days. And gaining additional time. Both have shown evidence of being equally effective. So just know that there's multiple ways to actually do this. The point is that we do give students additional opportunities after that initial acquisition to practice, so that it will be stored in long-term memory. Remember, we said we were going to hold. Now we're going to go to that step 3, that retrieval. These students need to be retrieving the information in a way that is effortful. And so Dr. Archer said the effect of retrieval practice is the finding that long-term memory is increased when some of the learning period is devoted to retrieving the to-be-remembered information. She also mentions that, it's also sometimes it's called the testing effect or testing enhanced learning. But it is where you give a little bit of time between when you teach it or when they are practicing it before you ask them to retrieve it. Not enough time for forgetting to happen, but enough time for them to actually access that information using some effort. And that's important when you know your students. What might be effortful for one student might be forgetting time for another. So just knowing your students, being aware of the intentionality when asking that critical information. Ask not tell. Ask, not tell. So we're going to participate a little bit in this considered, just comparing a traditional math review with a retrieval practice review. Think about your experience when teachers are reviewing for an assessment. Who's doing the talking? Now, I have to admit that my first few years in education, I did a daggone good job at our math review. I reviewed the information. My students sat passively, nodding to me and maybe jotting down notes. But it was very much me going over that study review guide or study guide for them and reminding them what's important. But if that's all they ever did, then it was pretty much ineffective because it went in one ear and out the other because there wasn't any effort on their part to retrieve it. I might go over the definition, for example, of an integer, and I might tell them, oh, it's a whole number, and tell them that, the definition. Give them some examples that they can look at, but that's all they're really doing. They might have those examples for them to go home and look at again, but they're still just looking at it. They're not retrieving it. I might talk about some other pieces of important information that are on the test, whether it's reviewing rational numbers or reviewing absolute value. But it's pretty much me telling and making sure that they're aware of, very intentionally, the big key pieces that are going to be assessed. There's a lot of clarity, but there's no practice. There's no effort on the students to recall the information, and that's what they're going to be asked to do during an assessment or in future classes. And so we need to spend more time asking and not telling. Not tell, tell, tell. If I'm going to be doing retrieval practice, this is what it would look like in a math review, where I incorporate the retrieval practice. I would ask students to write down, after they examine a few examples on the whiteboard or in their handout, write down which one of these are integers. So they have to analyze, this is the students now creating some effort, which one of those are the integers. So there's some effort there. Then I might ask them why each one of these are an integer or not an integer. Asking them to turn and talk to their partner and explain to them why. So we're going to give them feedback. We might say, okay, remember, an integer is a whole number, not a fractional or digital part, and can be positive or negative. So when they look at -5, they're going to then look through that checklist and say, oh, and turn to their partner and say, when I analyze this, it is a whole number. It's not a fractional. It doesn't have a fractional or digital part, and it is negative, and it's allowed to be negative. When I go to 1 and 43/100ths, then they might be saying, well, this has a fractional or digital part, so it is not an integer. If you go through each one of these examples, then students are having to pull that information and be critical in their explanation when they turn and talk to their partner or say it to the whole class. Now, we're going to give them multiple opportunities to do this. Then, if we still find that they need more at analyzing which numbers are integers, then we're going to have at the ready some additional practice. This is an important piece, ask, not tell. And that is why it is passcode number 3. I'm hoping that we just constantly are thinking through our own practices on, are we telling or are we asking? Are we asking students to retrieve information that we find critical? Or are we just telling and hoping that it sticks. It's now time for step 3, where you're going to apply for your certificate. So if you go to that training guide, you will see a hyperlink to apply for the certificate. Click on that. Now, when you get to the form, you need to make sure you are carefully typing in your email address and the way you want your name to appear. Your email is the most important piece here, because if there's any typos on that, that certificate will go somewhere out in space into that cloud, and you will not have access to it, and you will need to reapply again. So you need all 3 of those passcodes. It's multiple choice. We are also asking that you give us some feedback and be specific on what you feel like was the best part that you will incorporate and that will make changes in your instructional practices. I hope that this was insightful and that you walked away, or you're walking away with an appreciation for explicit instruction, as well as the need for retrieval practice, that asking, not telling. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful year.